कि ये वाला जो महान फ्रंटलाइन है, this is what we would be talking about. Okay, and this is already, I don't know how many of you have any idea about it. It has already landed in trouble. In terms of its cover, the design on the cover is what has created its own crisis, its own controversy, and there's a lot of back and forth discussion which is happening, of course, on social media. But then there is something that happened last Saturday, and we can't let go of that sort of an opportunity. ये तो होता रहेगा क्योंकि ये घर की मुर्गी है. ये this is something that we can keep talking about for a simple reason, because these are issues that sort of never decline, never get over. We are going to keep going back to them, and that's the reason why we can at some later point of time again revisit it. And that later point possibly would be as early as next week itself. So filhal, despite the fact that I had decided it and well prepared for it, कि this is what we need to talk about and this is what we need to sort of keep right center stage. Unfortunately, the sort of things that have happened in the Middle East now bring us around to this point that we better talk about that for a simple reason, because शायद आगे जाके उसके बारे में बात करने का वैसा वाला मौका ना मिले जैसा वाला अब भी मिल जाएगा. Okay, I'm not going to go through any of the facts which are fairly well known in terms of क्या हो रहा है, क्या चल रहा है. It's there, right there in front of us. And why should we be talking about it? Of course, we in India should of course be talking about it for a simple reason, because there are a whole range of things which are dependent on it. Starting off from something called as oil. So the government of India's official position is the present stocks of both oil and gas in India would possibly be enough to stretch us to something like 25 days. Of course, gas के front पे rationalization के orders कल शाम से ही निकल के आए हैं, which demand that except for critical and priority sectors, natural gas should not be made available to anybody else. So जो critical और priority sectors वाले consumers है, खाली उनके लिए अभी जो gas available है उसका इस्तेमाल किया जाएगा. Non-critical, non-priority will have to now wait for it. We don't know how long and when exactly would things come to a close. Depending on what madman are you consulting, this one is going to go on for the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe half a year, maybe 1 full year, or possibly all time to come. So that depends on what sort of madman is it that you're consulting. People are telling you all sorts of numbers and all sorts of figures. A country like India that is completely dependent on oil and gas cannot afford anything for a stretched period of time. So गलती से भी ये अगर आने वाले 15 या 20 दिन में खत्म नहीं हुआ तो we are going to have a very difficult situation on our hands. Okay. I hope people are aware of the fact almost 88% of all oil and gas that is consumed in India is something that comes by way of imports. We do not have any domestic stocks of it. We don't manufacture anything of it. Almost 88% of all fossil fuels, liquid and gaseous fossil fuels which are used in this country are things that come from outside. And close to something like 2/3 of it is what comes from the Middle East. Okay, so ऐसी वाली situation में ये हमारे लिए बिल्कुल ही sort of गवारा चीज नहीं है. We can't let this go on for a long time. But having had said that, we don't have anything in our power in terms of bringing this to a close. So we can't let this go for a long time for an obvious reason, because somehow or the other it's going to become a big problem for us. As I said, in 20-25 days, it's like going to be a terrible sort of a situation. At least as of now, they are telling you that you don't need to panic. We do have stocks and there's a very strong possibility in a reasonable period of time this will close. But if it doesn't close, you don't know for sure that you're going to have a huge crisis on your hand. The budget for 2026-2027 was never designed by taking this into account. So ever since this has started, and this has started for tomorrow, it would be almost a week that this has got started. And इस एक week में oil का price अगर आप देखो, barrel of oil now is almost $25 high. Okay, so last week around the same time when I was talking to you, it would have been 64, 65 US dollars per barrel. We are already talking about $84 per barrel. If this doesn't ease off in a reasonable period of time, you are already having experts in the field talking about oil possibly hitting $120 to $150 a barrel. At $120, $150 a barrel, all mathematics that underpins budget 2026, 2027 goes out for a toss. So the budget was never prepared for something which said that oil would possibly come in at $120, $150 a barrel. अगर $120, $150 a barrel हो गया, तो the budget is definitely gone out for a toss. Okay, and that is just the start of things. मतलब, how would things keep on escalating? Well, there is absolutely no ceiling for that. So this is just a start of things by way of which things start becoming very, very difficult. 20-25 days is what we can bear on. Of course, if you look at, say, for example, the more well-off countries, so if you look at China, if you look at South Korea, if you look at Japan, they can bear on for almost double the time as compared to what we can do. There is a concept of what is called as the strategic oil reserves. And if you look at the strategic oil reserves that most of the developed countries in East Asia have, the Chinese being right at the top of everything, they can bear this on for 77 days. If you're talking about South Korea, if you're talking about Japan, these are countries which can bear on for almost 50 days, almost double of what we can do. Okay, so these are countries which have been filling in their reserves for quite some period of time. Not that anybody had an idea that this is what was going to happen. So आपके पास जो reserves है, उसको fill in करना एक normal protocol का हिस्सा है. First, you should have the capacity for it, and then you should have the necessary sort of supply to go about filling up the reserves. So since they have filled up their reserves, they don't have this problem. Of course, उनमें से हर एक का problem शुरू होने वाला है in 50 days, 70 days and thereof. But they can slightly bear it more as compared to what we can do. The second big reason why we are worried is for a simple reason, because the Middle East is home to a large Indian diaspora. So practically all the countries that have now got affected, if you put all of them together, you are talking of approximately 1 crore people of Indian origin जो इन countries में रहते हैं for purposes mostly of what is called as employment. So there is a small number of people who are there out for purposes of education, but a large number of people are there for what is called as purposes of employment. $118 billion is what we received in remittances from overseas Indians last year. Almost 50% of it came from the Middle East. So you can do the maths for yourself. 118 billion is a huge amount of money. So India tops all the charts as far as overseas Indians sending in money into the country is concerned. This money is extremely important for a very simple reason, because ये direct hard foreign exchange है, which is what is most of the time used by the RBI to prop up the price of the rupee. So if the rupee has to be propped up, the RBI obviously needs foreign exchange, and this is one of those sources of foreign exchange in addition to what is called as exports. So ये एक readily available किस्म का resource होता है. Exports का problem हमेशा ये रहता है that people might bring in that money or people might leave that money outside the country also. But remittances inevitably come back to the country. And that's the reason why remittances are mostly valued as compared to, say, for example, other sources of foreign exchange. 50% of that money comes from the Middle East. Of course, it's something that is fairly under a certain sort of stress in the couple of years gone by. But nevertheless, this is an extremely important source of money as far as we in India are concerned. Millions of families across the country depend on this money for almost day-to-day expenses. And a stretched security episode like this effectively means that your family members, your next of kin who are there, who are making this money for you, are also going to see a certain sort of a situation in which they won't be able to make this money for you. Okay, so you have tons of examples कि जिधर लोगों से ये कहा गया है कि they can't report for work They should not report for work because the security situation is such that we don't want you to come over and get stranded over here. Okay, so you have a problem in terms of India's energy security. You have a problem in terms of the remittance economies. You have a problem in terms of exports. So I don't know if you have any idea about one of India's very significant agricultural scientists in the last week telling us this, that we are literally getting buried under rice in this country. Okay, the gone by Kharif season ka rice jo hai is now being harvested, is now being packed up as far as the Food Corporation of India godowns are concerned. The one problem that the government of India has is we are sitting on almost 4 times the stock of rice that we normally need for what is called as buffer stock purposes. So, जितना होना चाहिए उसका almost 4 गुना ज़्यादा rice already godowns में पड़ा है before you can account for this season's harvest. A huge portion of this rice is exported to a lot of Middle Eastern countries. So, all the countries in the Hormuz Strait fix are countries which are buyers of Indian rice, especially that premium one, the basmati one that goes out. So, if you look at the Iranians, if you look at the Saudis, if you look at the Qataris, the Kuwaitis, practically for all of them, rice coming from India is one of the most important sources as far as carbs are concerned. And they are possibly one of the largest buyers as far as Indian rice is concerned. But if the security situation continues to be what it is, it effectively means that this rice has no buyers. Okay, and this in a situation wherein you already have a problem of huge stocks which are lying there out in the open. 1 month from now, it would be time to start talking about wheat, because that is the time when the Rabi wheat would be harvested, and you're going to have a major problem as far as the food security of the Food Corporation of India's godowns are concerned, that if the rice stocks are not moved out, obviously you're going to have a problem in terms of accommodating the wheat stocks, which the government will start purchasing around the 14th of April, when the wheat for this season will start getting harvested and coming to the mandis. So, chota sa problem hai. 86-year-old man has been killed somewhere in the Middle East, and just look at the range of problems that a poor country of 140 crore people is facing. Okay, and not that we had any idea about it, not that we had got anything to do with it, not that we had wished this. It's just that we are at the receiving end of all these problems. Okay. So, the world is almost sort of an uncertain place in terms of the fact that there isn't much that you can go about controlling for. So, when the budget was made, you budgeted for oil not at as high as $120, $130, $150 a barrel, but for something more moderate and more reasonable in the 65 to $70 range. Now, you suddenly have this problem that the price of oil is going up, and the entire mathematics on which this budget is based now seems extremely up in the air, and you just don't know what needs to be done about it. Okay, welcome to a world which is interconnected, which is globalized. The more you try to dissociate from it, the more you start realizing that usse पीछा छुड़ाना इतना भी आसान नहीं है. Okay, any concrete solutions? No, for a very simple reason, because for all the fanciful ideas that we have in India of how big and powerful we are, it's exactly in situations like this that you start realizing how powerless we are. So, we didn't create this situation. We don't have any control over how is it going to go about panning out. There is not much that we can do in terms of directing its course. And there is absolutely nothing that we can do to change the course. So, directing the course to chhodi dijiye, we are just not in a position to go about changing anything as far as this is concerned. Okay, but then in India we carry on. So, if put on any Indian television channel and the sort of nonsense that is going on them in full blast, full blow, has no bearing on the situation on the ground, has no bearing to anything that is even remotely called as reality. कुछ नहीं कर सकते हम, कुछ भी नहीं. Other than looking at things going up in ashes, other than dreams getting shattered the way in which they are, talk to hundreds of Indian families all over the place, whose loved ones, whose near ones, whose dear ones have got stranded at different places all across the Middle East, and talk to them in terms of understanding as to how agonizing the whole situation is. Maybe people went for a week's holiday and you suddenly had this problem on your hands and you are just not able to walk out. And you never budgeted for anything bigger than this. So you had just budgeted for 1 week holiday, and now what you have is you have got to keep paying a large amount of money for a situation which you have just not called for. You have people writing right, left and center, talking to whoever they can talk to in India in terms of हमारे लोगों को आप वापस लेके आओ, but there is not much that can be done about it. Because ये वो वाला किस्सा है ही नहीं ना कि जिसमें मैं I can roll out the carpet at my home, sit on it, fly over to the Middle East, put your people on it and come back home. ऐसा तो नहीं ना हो सकता है. So if I've got to get your people, I've got to charter ships, I've got to charter planes, and nothing of that is working as of now. Okay, so it just tells you a lot in terms of how fanciful a world is it that we are living in. One thing that needs to be made very, very clear, that attack on the Iranian submarine in Sri Lanka, on that Iranian vessel in Sri Lanka by an American submarine, should be seen in that same lineage of controversies and arguments that have started with the Naravne book. How good are we in terms of securing our interest in our own backyard? Okay, ये ship जो था, ये आया था विशाखापट्टनम to take part in a series of joint naval exercises. The ship has been attacked in what is called as international waters after it has left Indian waters. And technically, it has moved out of Indian waters, it's moving into Sri Lankan waters, and it's at that sort of a space that this ship has been attacked. The Americans have not notified anybody in India. So the Indian Defense Establishment has no clue that we had an American submarine as close as that to Indian waters. Okay, thank everyone that Parliament is presently not in session. You would have expected a lot of tamasha had Parliament been in session. पर ज़्यादा देर के लिए वो out of session नहीं रहने वाली है. जब भी वो वापस आएगी, we have to have some very concrete answers to this. As to, did the government of India have any clear idea about the positioning of an American submarine as close as that to Indian territorial waters? Okay, the ship has been attacked on high seas. The ship has been attacked in international waters. That's a different story. But the submarine that has attacked it was located somewhere very close to Indian territorial waters. So you automatically have another crisis on your hand in terms of how capable are we of defending ourselves as far as our own backyards are concerned. So the high Himalayas, international waters of the Indian coast. Of course, one thing that we can do well is bomb Pakistan, but that's a different story altogether. But then ये बाकी वाले जो problems है ना, ये problems बहुत ज़्यादा severe है. Okay, and all of them sort of get revealed on account of the killing of this old man in Iran by the Americans. Now, to just go back and place things right in their context. Why did this happen? How did this come about? And what exactly are going to be the ramifications of it? If you look at the way in which the conflict is panning out as of now, it seems nobody is in an urgency to bring this to a close. Except for the countries in the Gulf region who are very desperate about, can you please, for God's sake, stop it? Okay, So the three major parties to this, one the Israelis, second the Americans, and three the Iranians, do not seem to be under any sort of urgency to bring this to a close. It seems उनके पास इस दुनिया का पूरा टाइम, सारा लीजर, सब कुछ है in terms of letting this go on for as many number of days as is possible. Okay. The Iranian problem becomes acute on account of the fact that we don't have any information coming out of the country for a simple reason, because the country has been practically closed down. So the net has got switched off. There isn't much that is coming out of Iran. Most of the foreign correspondents who are reporting from Iran are reporting only from Tehran. And udhar unka problem ye hai, with incessant bombing going on in the way in which it is going on at very uncertain times of the day, they are not in a position to go out and actually verify and check for themselves. तो बहुत सारा जो आज की तारीख में रिपोर्ट हो रहा है is basically based on some sort of I heard somebody say this sort of a thing. Nobody is actually going out and finding out as to is this really the state of things, for a simple reason, because that just can't be done. And बाकी बचा हुआ कसर जो है has been taken out by the Iranian government by seeing to it that all information is blocked. There's no information which is coming out. There's a total sort of a freeze. On top of it, the Iranian government for at least the last couple of days has started doing something very funny. They have started attacking countries which in the first place should never have been attacked. So Iran is attacking Turkey. Iran is attacking Azerbaijan to its north. Iran is attacking Oman. Iran is attacking, most importantly, Dubai. And Dubai is getting attacked very incessantly. अब ये वो countries है which technically shouldn't be attacked for a very simple reason, because for a lot of Iranians connected with the government and who are part of the power elite, these are exactly the countries that you go to in search of leisure, for shopping, for going abroad, and so on and so forth. Given the fact that a lot of members of the regime are people who are under sanctions, obviously these are people who cannot travel very far off. These are not people who can take a European vacation. These are not people who can go to America. These are not people who can go to so many countries on the face of this earth. The easiest places that you can travel to in search of what is called as an abroad experience is you take your car and you drive to either Azerbaijan, you drive to Turkey, you drive to Dubai or something like that. And that is how you experience the world beyond your country. Okay. But now it seems that the Iranian government has started targeting all these countries. And from that, what people are gathering is the Iranian government is trying to do everything possible to stop Iranians from leaving the country. Okay, of course, you can't fly out for a very simple reason, because there are no flights which are moving in and out of the country. The only thing which you can do, as was done by, say, for example, the Russians when the Ukrainian war became very stiff, is to just take your car, lock up your stuff into it, and drive to the nearest point from which you can leave the country and move out. For most Iranians, that would be to go to Turkey, that would be to go to places like Azerbaijan, that would be to go to places like Pakistan or Afghanistan. Unfortunately, in those cases, since you already have a war that is going on between the two of them, not many Iranians can think in terms of going to that side of the border. Okay, that will mean to go to Iraq. So, ये वो countries है कि जिसमें आप escape कर सकते हो, just in case things get very tough at home. But the very fact that you are attacking those countries effectively means that those countries are not going to let anybody from your country escape into their country. So the borders now stand sealed between Turkey and Iran, between Azerbaijan and Iran. Of course, Dubai का तो कोई सवाल ही नहीं है. They are not letting anybody come in. But if they are doing this, this is automatically a sign of the fact that within Iran, at least as far as the structure of power is concerned, there's a huge amount of chaos which is presently going on. There's massive confusion. There's a huge amount of fear that if Ayatollah Said Ali Khamenei can die, practically anybody can die. And अब अगर इसमें से कुछ करना है, you need to save yourself. And saving yourself essentially means liquid cash is not much that you can take along with you. But there is gold, there is a lot by way of precious metals and so on and so forth. And the urgency is now to get out of the country. because that's the only one way by which you can save yourselves. But it seems that the Iranian government's wonderful idea is attack those countries where these people can now move on into, thereby seeing to it that those countries would close down their borders for anybody coming out of Iran. Thereby force your people with that option which says is that लड़ने के अलावा कुछ नहीं कर सकते हैं. We have got to fight this out. We have no other option left. This is not a question of your choice. This is not about whether you want to fight it or not. We are imposing a fight on you. Just as they have imposed a fight on us, now we impose a fight on you. You have no other options, but you will have to fight. Okay. Of course, is that working? Definitely not. Because a simple mathematical sort of calculation in terms of how many drones, how many missiles were being fired by the Iranians last week and how many of them were done in this week. People already have an elaborate mathematics which shows this that 60 to 80% low hai. So as compared to what was being fired last week, what you're firing this week is almost 80% low, or in some cases it is 60% low, which effectively means that something is working, at least as far as the Iranians and as far as the Americans and the Israelis are concerned. So for all the fun that has been made of the Trump White House, and very surprisingly, this is an Epstein connection, a very close Epstein connection. Nevertheless, it is working. The pressure is definitely working in Iran, as can be seen at least from whatever one can get an idea of. So, as I said, we are all straining to find out more in terms of what's actually happening on the ground. But we hardly have any information. पर जो deductive logic use किया जाता है in terms of finding out whatever is getting reported, whatever is what you know about, how do you read between those lines? So the simple way of reading between the lines is, well, if the government is doing that, then it automatically means that there's some big problem that is going on in Tehran. Okay, and that's obvious for a very simple reason, because as I was telling a friend of mine, Sayyid Ali Khamenei came to power when I was 17 years of age. I'm now in my mid-50s, and that's the point at which Sayyid Ali Khamenei has left. If you have ruled a country for that long, and if you are dead in the way in which you are dead, it obviously leaves behind a lot of unanswered questions, a huge amount of uncertainty, and a vast problem which says this, that we just don't know what comes after this. So for most Iranians, they had never known any other ruler in their life other than Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who ruled them for 36 years. Okay, the point at which he came to rule Iran was a point at which the Rajiv Gandhi government was demitting office in India. The point at which he is dead is the point at which Narendra Modi is already in his second term as Prime Minister. So you had Rajiv Gandhi, you had VP Singh, you had Chandrasekhar, you had Narasimha Rao, you had Deve Gowda, you had Gujral, you had the three Vajpayee governments, you had Manmohan Singh, you had Narendra Modi completing 10 years in power. Itna gaya hai. And Sayyid Ali Khamenei was there in power for all these years. Are you getting it? So all itna, India changed as dramatically and as drastically as that. And Khamenei stayed in power for all those years. And what he did in that entire period in which he governed Iran is he developed a system which I don't know, we are going to take a lot of time in terms of unpacking it and understanding it as to how exactly does it work and what exactly were the results that it was supposed to sort of bring about. The Islamic Revolution came into power 9 years before Khamenei became the supreme leader. ये एक unique किस्म का system है which is found in no other parts of the world. Iran is the only country of its size which is called as a theocracy. We do not refer to any country on the face of this earth with that terminology. Okay, so this is the only country which is what is called as a theocracy. What one means by a theocracy, the word theo is a Greek term which essentially means God, and krasi is rule of. So this is the only system in which God is supposed to be the ruler. Okay, the only system in which all sovereignty belongs to God, all power by the system is invoked in the name of God. The ultimate arbiter of all power is supposed to be God. Okay, ये खतरनाक system है. And for a lot of people in India, Iran is an example that should be studied very closely to understand it as clearly as is possible. Never mix religion with politics. The casualties that you get once you start mixing religion with politics are simply numerous. You just can't count them. Okay. And so, as I said, it's like the only state of its type. You do not have a state like this. There is no other country on the face of this earth which looks like this. This is the only country in which ultimate sovereignty belongs to God. The ultimate power broker is God. All government functions in the name of God. Okay. And obviously, the men roaming around in black turbans, that is what Sayyids are. The word Sayyid essentially is a term that we use in most of these cases for people who are connected with the Prophet's family. They wear black turbans. The ones who would be wearing white turbans are supposed to be people who are not connected with the Prophet's family. So in the Iranian system, there's a lot of prestige that comes the way of people who wear those black turbans. And the black turbans are normally supposed to be what are called as Sayyids. That essentially means that these are people who can trace their lineage back to the Prophet. I'm talking about the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad. They are connected to his family in some degree or the other. So with Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the claim is made that he is the 38th great grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. So for 38 generations, if you trace it back, what you go back to is what is called as Prophet Muhammad. He comes straight from that lineage, and that's the reason why he's normally referred to as a Sayyid. इसका एक ही simple problem ये है, Khamenei enjoys a sort of power and authority which is unparalleled. Of course, under the law, under the constitution, his power cannot be challenged by anybody. Okay. These are people who claim to speak in name of God. They almost give you that sense of something is right because they're saying that is right, and they're saying it to be right because that is what God has told them that this is what is right. Okay, Shia Islam has a lot of those types of esotericisms in which the idea is God inspires you, God in some way or the other sort of wires your brain and your intellect to work in certain ways. And that's the reason why these types of people are important, because they give you a very clear understanding of right and wrong based on what God considers as right and wrong. Okay, this is a very powerful system, but it is equally open to abuse. And it can be massively abused. So they take a call in terms of what is right and wrong. You cannot challenge them. Any challenge to the Ayatollahs is considered as a challenge to God himself. And if they lay a charge against you, which they have done in the case of most of these people who demonstrated against the Iranian government in the month of January 2026, the charge is you are waging war against God. And in the law, the only punishment for waging war against God, if the charge is proved, is death. It would depend on who the judge is in terms of how should the death be executed. So, should you be shot dead? Should you be hanged? Should you be cut to pieces? आपके साथ क्या करना है वो उस जज पे डिपेंडेंट है कि जो जज आपके लिए डेथ सेंटेंस पास आउट करेगा. Okay, but the one thing that you would always try to save yourself from is a regime saying that you are waging war against God. So if they, for any reason, decide to bring that charge against you, if that charge gets proven in a court of law, it's very easy to prove that sort of a charge. The only thing that can happen is you would be dead. Okay. As of now, while I'm talking to you, there are millions of Iranians across Iran who are very worried about people who were arrested for the protests of January 2026. So last महीने जिन लोगों ने प्रोटेस्ट किया है और जिनमें से काफी सारे लोगों को गिरफ्तार किया गया है, some of them are placed in prisons which the Israelis have gone about attacking. So we don't know what has happened to these people. Some of them are placed in prisons with which we no longer have any connects. There are a whole range of people who have been arrested, including this woman called as Nargis Mahmoudi, who is basically an Iranian Nobel laureate. So आपको Nobel Prize मिला होगा, वो आपके घर पे, हमको उससे कोई लेने देने नहीं है. For us, you are basically somebody who is waging war against God. Okay, so tons of people that we no longer have any connect with. And then there are those 30,000 youngsters, mostly youngsters, who were killed by the regime last month on those 2 nights of 7th and 8th of January when Iran again shut down the net and when Ayatollah Khamenei literally let in the army and the IRGC to go out and destroy the protests. Okay, and the destruction was, you have almost 30,000 people who are dead, though the Iranian government's official number, for very strange reasons, always happens to be 3117. So whenever you have those types of episodes in Iran where you have a demonstration, large numbers of people are killed, the Iranian government every time comes with an accurate number called as 3117. वो ये number कहाँ से लाती है वो खुद जानती है. Nobody has any idea कि ये number exactly 3117 हमेशा कैसे होता है. But of course, this time around you have testimonies from millions of people across the country that something like 30,000 people are dead. Seen from the perspective of those who are arrested and those who are dead, Ayatollah Khamenei बहुत ही सस्ता मारा. Okay, because the fundamental problem is he is somebody who has wronged us. He should have had been put on trial. Justice demands that he should have had been tried. But then to be killed right on the first day of the conflict, in what seems to be what the government is now spinning out to be a narrative of martyrdom, the cause of justice remains unfulfilled. So for millions of Iranians, and millions is like, how many people is it that we are talking about? Iran is a huge country and a very strange country as far as its geography is concerned. It's made up of 9.2 crore people. For some perspective, if you look at the economic survey that the Maharashtra government sent to the Maharashtra Vidhan Sabha yesterday, Maharashtra's population is approximately 3 crore more than the total population of Iran itself. So Iran's population is approximately 9.2 crore, Maharashtra's population is roughly 12 crore. What that effectively means is Maharashtra is a more populous place as compared to Iran. So Iran is almost 3 crore people less, 3 crore souls less than what we have in Maharashtra. Okay. And in that, if you have 30,000 people dead, in that, if you have hundreds who have been arrested, then you essentially are talking about a number which has an immediate sort of an impact. Okay. So effectively, with last month's protest across the country, there are very few families that know about somebody who is not dead. So when your country is small as 9.2 crore and you have almost 30,000 deaths reported across the country, what that effectively means is practically every family knows somebody at a very close distance who is dead and gone. And from the perspective of those families, this is a fundamental problem which you have, that Khamenei died without facing justice. He was never tried. But looking at Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, Hitler, for that matter of fact, slightly comparable to Mussolini, but not exactly similar to Mussolini, most of them die without standing trial. So most of them who have been responsible for the deaths of millions of their countrymen are not people who ever stand trial. Of course, Pol Pot did stand trial, but at the point at which he stood trial, most of it was too hazy. He was not in a position to respond to anything. Mao never stood trial. Hitler never stood trial. Okay, Stalin never stood any trial. So they managed to finish off 1/5 of their country. They managed to finish off a huge portion of their country's population. But sadly enough, these are people who never stand trial. So you might talk of justice, but somehow the other, justice evades all of them. They die without ever facing it. No reason why Ayatollah Khamenei should not have faced it. Maybe there's always a first time for something. He could easily have faced it. But given the fact that the Israelis were desperate to finish him off, he's gone. The first reaction obviously was euphoria across the country. So the very minute when Iranian state television announced that he's dead, the language used was very floral, talked of martyrdom, talked of a great death, and so on and so forth. But out on the streets, people were celebrating. Log jasn mana rahe the the minute we came to know that he's dead and gone. But then the firing started, and then that first round of celebration has now been taken over by a huge sense of anxiety that, well, if the Americans and the Israelis succeed in this, what happens to us? And if they can kill him, well, they are anyway killing people indiscriminately. The first killing of this round of the war, was a killing of those 160 girls in that school in a place called as Minab, which is a small rural place on the outskirts of Tehran. Nobody had any inkling that this is what the Israeli missiles were going to go about first targeting. This was the first targeted killing. And now there's this huge controversy going on whether the missile was fired by the Americans or whether it was an Israeli missile. Because the whole problem is you have a whole range of people who are interested in pressing charges of crimes against humanity. But for that, the first thing that we need clarity on is, was the missile fired by the Americans or was this missile fired by the by the Israelis? We have no clarity on that. Okay, so you are in the sort of situation in which you are. As I said, nobody seems to be in a hurry to bring this to a close. They're pretty cool and calm about it. So you have the Israelis and the Americans who keep firing during certain times of the day. And then during the remaining portion of the day, you have the Iranians doing strange things in terms of firing intermittently. They don't fire as consistently as the Israelis and the Americans do. They fire intermittently, and they fire at targets which they are not very sure as to what exactly is it that it is going to go about producing. So a simple idea is, well, if it does hit a target and if you do have amount of destruction caused, great. If it doesn't, equally great. Okay, so it seems that within Iran, there's a huge amount of crisis, at least as far as the political structure is concerned. And of course, it is, as I said, inevitable for a simple reason, because your ruler for 36 years is gone. And when somebody who has ruled that long is gone, the system takes an amount of time to find its balance. So as of now, it's like thrown off balance, and it's going to take some amount of time in terms of finding its balance, finding its position to come back to something which says that we are yet in control. Okay, so that's one crisis that we have. The second interesting crisis is, why was this started? And of course, this was started by the Israelis. Israel is governed by a prime minister who for the last almost 3 decades has had a fanatic sort of an idea that we need to stop the Iranians. And we need to stop the Iranians from a bomb. So, from a nuclear bomb. If you try looking at Prime Minister Netanyahu's speeches over the last 3 decades, practically every speech will convince you that by the time the speech is over, the Iranians would already have had loaded a weapon. And a weapon no less than a nuclear bomb. So for the last 3 decades, this man is desperate with an idea which says this, that we have got to stop the Iranians. They have weapons. They are capable of a nuclear weapon. They also have these missiles which can be used to launch the weapon. And as a reason why we have got to do everything possible to stop them. There were American presidents who did heed him and who did let him once in a while go and do stuff to Iran. And then there were American presidents who refused to heed him. For a simple reason, because still you don't have those very clear International Atomic Energy Agency pictures of 2002. We were not very sure as to what does this bomb exactly mean. Okay, now let's be very clear. The Iranian government is very clear about this. We don't have a bomb. We don't want a bomb. We are never going to make a bomb. But we have a sovereign right to enriching uranium. We want to do that because this is our right under all the international treaties that we are signatories to, that we can enrich uranium. The opposite side's idea is, for a country that sits on the world's second largest proven reserves of oil and gas, why do you need uranium? You're already sitting on the world's second. Iran is a part of both the gatherings, OPEC, which exports oil, and the gas exporting consortium, wherein natural gas is exported. Iran is rich in both resources. So the question that has always been asked is, why do you need uranium? Why do you need uranium enrichment? The Iranian answer, for the last 7 decades, it's a clean source of energy. We have the scientific expertise to do that. We have a sovereign right as a sovereign country to do it, and nobody else can stop us from doing it. Which on the face of it makes perfect sense. The game did not start with the Ayatollahs, the game started with the Shah of Iran. So it was a Shah who was the first person who went in for the nuclear developments, with the building in of reactors and the building in of all this infrastructure which was necessary to go about enriching uranium. The Ayatollahs, with a certain blip after they came to power, came back to the program. And Sayyid Ali Khamenei almost built it up as a certain sort of guarantee of his power. That the world will not dislodge us, we'll carry on in our position of power, and for that, the perfect guarantee was that we should have a certain sort of nuclear capability. Okay, so this is what they have been doing for the last so many years. 2015, they signed a treaty with the Americans, with the Europeans, with the International Atomic Energy Agency, wherein they open up all their reactors to international inspection. 2018, Donald Trump walks out of this treaty, as Donald Trump keeps on doing these types of silly games, for a simple reason, because the Iranians had signed the earlier treaty with Barack Obama, and now they need to renegotiate it with me. Are you getting that? If you have never heard of a more sillier story, you would possibly not know about it, because a more sillier story just doesn't exist. This war came on 28th of February, that is a Saturday, which is the day of the Shabbat in Israel, when everything is closed, and it's the day when the new week starts in Iran after the Friday close. The Iranians had negotiated with the Americans on Friday in Geneva, courtesy the mediation of the Omanis. The Omani foreign minister released a detailed transcript of what happened as far as the two sides are concerned. The Americans walked out of the meeting feeling very happy, and the Omani position was everyone was satisfied with the outcome. The Iranians agreed to place all the reactors under IAEA supervision. The missile program was supposed to be placed under a certain sort of international regulation. Everything had been agreed to. सब कुछ, every single thing that the Americans wanted since 2018, Donald Trump wanted, everything was agreed to. Because that was Sayyid Ali Khamenei. When it comes to the existence, when it comes to the very existence of your power, concede. Live to fight for another day. Don't stretch matters to a point where things break. Don't go about playing those types of games wherein everyone goes in the danger zone. So he had that remarkable flexibility to understand things that, well, this is getting very dangerous. In that sort of a situation, back off. Concede everything, let everything happen as of now. Maybe at some later point of time, we'll take a look at all of this and think of everything from a different perspective. So they had technically agreed to everything. Saturday morning, the Israelis attack. So the most important question is, if they had already agreed to everything, why did this attack happen? After it started, Trump started demanding that Iran negotiate. And the Iranian government's position was, you might as well go to hell. We tried doing this with you twice. दोनों भी बार हमारे खिलाफ बहुत बड़ी गद्दारी हुई है. That we keep on negotiating. We are told that everything will come to a good end, and then you suddenly go back and start attacking us. Now we are not going to negotiate with you. No more negotiations. A simple problem is two. One is Epstein, and the second one is Benjamin Netanyahu's unique political career. There is no career as gorgeous as that. He is Israel's longest ruling prime minister. No prime minister has governed Israel for that long a period of time. He almost believes he is some sort of God. People should have had looked at Narendra Modi's latest visit to Israel. It didn't seem that that was a state visit. It almost was made by Netanyahu to seem that वो मुझे मिलने के लिए आया है क्योंकि मैंने उसको बुलाया है. And of course, वो विजिट एक बहुत ही बड़ा ब्लैक बॉक्स है जो बिल्कुल ही खोला नहीं गया है. Why did Modi go to Israel? When just a couple of hours after he came back, Israel went to war against Iran. Why was Modi called to Israel? Well, it's clear he was called to Israel. He didn't go on his own. There was nothing that was planned. These types of visits don't happen in this manner. They are decided months in advance. There's no occasion to celebrate. He has gone abruptly. He has come equally back abruptly. We have no idea as to why has he gone there. Except for my old hunch, there's something in the remaining Epstein material जो काफी interesting है और जिसका रिलीज होना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है. वो हो जाएगा. At the American end, the leakages have already started. So we are not worried about that. So the whole point is, Israel has to face its next parliamentary election by September. Something that Netanyahu is not very sure of as to what would come out of it. You already had these 2 years of the Gaza war. You have a huge amount of problem on Netanyahu's hand in terms of the fact that Netanyahu international war criminal है. वो किधर भी नहीं जाता है. वो normally he gets out of Israel, he takes a long trip to America and then he comes back. He has been once to Hungary because he was called in by Prime Minister Orban, but he never goes to any other country for a very simple reason, because he knows that there's a very strong possibility people are going to go about arresting him. Okay, need to find out next year whether he goes to the the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York, given the fact that Zoran Mamdani has promised that he steps on New York and we are going to go about arresting him. Netanyahu goes nowhere. Nobody goes and visits him. He's the most toxic leader that you can think of. He has a whole range of corruption-related trials which are going on in the Israeli Supreme Court. He doesn't get along with his Supreme Court. So I don't know if you did, but you do have any idea about when Modi stood up to speak in the Israeli parliament, why did members of the Israeli opposition walk out of the parliament? Okay, in India they did try to spin by saying that, look, they're protesting Modi, which had nothing to do with Modi. It was basically a protest against Netanyahu himself. For a simple reason, because state protocol demands that the Supreme Court Chief Justice has to be called for these types of international meetings. And Netanyahu refuses to call in the Chief Justice for a simple reason, because he has a personal panga with him. The Chief Justice has warned him the day conflicts come to a close, he will have to come to the court and answer all questions in the trials against him. Netanyahu's alternative to this problem is to keep Israel in a state of permanent war. So one is over, Gaza is over, let's get started with Lebanon. Lebanon is done, let's get started with Jordan. Jordan is done, let's get started with Iran. Iran is done, let's get started with somebody. But let's keep the country busy in war, because if the country is not at war, the Supreme Court is going to ask me very simple questions, jo for a politician of my caliber now don't sound good. Why did these people give you money? Why did these people give you these gifts? What did you exactly do with this money? Why was your wife in a certain sort of financial dealing with these types of people? Now, these are questions which he doesn't want to answer. Are you getting it? Second big problem which he has is, this is what he had planned for the last 3 decades. He has no guarantee that after August 2026, he would be in a position to go ahead and do this. So his whole sense of a mission now means we have got to attack Iran now. Because if we don't do this now, you are never going to get a chance. But he knows he can't do that all alone until and unless the Americans don't come along. Now, how did the Americans come along? Epstein. There was never a president who would have had given in to the Israeli government and Israeli military intelligence's blackmailings but Donald Trump. The Bushes would never have done it because they never had any dealings with Epstein. The Clintons would never have done it because, as Bill Clinton's testimony tells you, as clear as is possible, I stopped dealing with him at the point, even before the point that he was convicted as a pedophile. जो बिडेन बेचारा खुद कुछ नहीं कर सकता था, वो इसके नात को लगेगा इसका कोई चांस ही नहीं था. Barack Obama, no sign of him. So in the last 3 decades, the only president who can work to the instructions of the Israeli intelligence, remember what I did tell you in the last session, Epstein was an Israeli intelligence asset. For every single document of Epstein that the Americans have access to, the Israelis have access to something more than that. There was never an American president who could have had given in to that sort of blackmailing. Trump is the easiest one to deal with for a simple reason, because all that you need to tell him is, well, there are so many files, there are so many papers, there are so many this, there are so many that. Now you just tell us as to what needs to be done. But it's a war. It might involve Americans getting killed. But then Trump has no problems with Americans getting killed. Don't you know what he did in Minnesota when ICE agents under him went about exactly doing that in terms of killing white Americans? Here is a president who doesn't have a problem in terms of Americans getting killed. He can happily do that. He was a perfect agent that the Israelis wanted, and they were never going to let go of him. And you now have the problem in which we all are. Are you getting that? This is where Epstein becomes very relevant to this conflict. If you remember the last one, when I did talk about Epstein, when I said this, that on one hand is Epstein's problem as far as pedophilia, as far as sexual abuse of minors is concerned. On the other hand is Epstein's connection with everybody connected to industry and finance who is involved in the death and destruction of the Palestinians. This is how the circle comes full and complete. The Israelis use Epstein as a way of blackmailing Donald Trump. Trump gives in to whatever they want. We are in the war that we have created. To the point that गए पूरे हफ्ते में the American establishment has not been on the same page as to why was this conflict started. If the Iranians had agreed to everything that you wanted, why was it started? What is it all about? Well, depends on who is it that you are asking. So someone says that it's about their ballistic missiles. Then someone says it's about their nuclear weapons. Then someone says that it's about changing the regime. They are not on the same page about what exactly is being done. Because they were never supposed to be on the same page. As far as the bomb itself is concerned, the International Atomic Energy Agency at its highest levels, that is the Director General, has publicly given a solemn undertaking which says this, that the Iranians are nowhere close to a bomb. Nowhere. They just can't be. Even the best science and estimates say, kam se kam 10 saal lagenge for them to go anywhere close to assembling a reasonable weapon. So you're not close to a bomb. If they were not close to anything of this, why was this done? For a simple reason, because whenever Netanyahu has this problem, that if I don't do this now, maybe after August or September 2026, I will never get a chance to do this. But then मैं ये अकेला नहीं कर सकता, तो इसीलिए तो डोनाल्ड ट्रंप है ना. Old men in their 70s, not worried about how young people live, face this world, die, or go to hell. In all the conflicts of the last 3 decades, this is the least popular one with the Americans. This is the first war कि जिसके first week में public support as polled out on the streets is just 25%. You never had a war which was this unpopular. Iraq 1991, 70% support. Afghanistan 2001, almost overwhelming 80 to 90% support. Iraq 2003, 75% support. ये पहला conflict है 3 decades में, in which the average American out on the streets is supporting this only to the extent of 25% people saying, yes, I see some reason why this should be done. The speed with which Israel loses its standing and legitimacy in American politics is simply breathtaking. Something which they are very clear about, that if it carries on in this level after November 2026, it is going to become very difficult to make a pro-Israeli argument in American politics. So let's get this done while it can be done. Are you getting that? That's the reason why it was done. And it was easy for a simple reason, because Sayyid Ali Khamenei was someone who was almost confident about this, that they cannot kill me. Because they are not going to find a better negotiator than me. He never thought that this is how he would die. He never thought that he would be dead so soon when the conflict has got started. He was prepared. Anyway, when you are 86, 87 years of age, you are anyway prepared to die. At 86, और दूसरा होना क्या आपकी जिंदगी में? मैं 86 वो उम्र नहीं ना when you can think in terms of now let me think in terms of a new start in my life. No. The only new start that you can get at 86 is to find your grave. So he's anyway prepared for this. He didn't have a problem with this. But he was equally confident about this. They won't kill me. Because they're not going to find a better negotiator than me. So in the June 2025 war, he accepted the idea that the people around him had, that he should leave the capital and not be seen anywhere close by and stay in safe bunkers. He stayed in safe bunkers at that point of time. पर इस बार खुले आम, absolutely खुले आम. अच्छा, there are a lot of people in India who are very much under the influence and mesmerized by that idea that Israeli intelligence is so powerful. Just look at the way in which they have worked. In terms of tracking him, in terms of finding as to what exactly is it that he keeps on doing on a minute by minute basis. And then look at the way in which they blew him off. So, चोर पुलिस वाली जो स्टोरीज होती है ना, वो अगर आप इंडियन मीडिया देखो तो लोगों को वो ऐसा बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग किस्म का अट्रैक्शन है that well, Israel is such a powerful country. Israel does so many things. And even in this one, they have gone about doing this, as far as Khamenei is concerned, in so systematic a way. There's the other side of the story. Israel spends a lot of money on all of this. A lot of time on all of this. Israeli intelligence is made up of people who can speak a minimum of 5 or 6 languages very fluently. Absolutely fluently. The Iran file was handled by people who can speak very fluent Persian. Very, very fluent. But nothing of this can work until and unless you did not have people from within Iran who are cooperating with the Israeli intelligence departments. This can't work on its own. This has to be responded to. This has to be supported. Somebody has to collaborate with you. That is how intelligence works. The simple problem is, why are the Iranians doing that? You had tons of senior army officers, people connected with the nuclear establishment, who were killed in the June war of 2025. You have tons of Israeli senior scientists working on the nuclear and the ballistic missile programs who have been time and again bumped off by the Israelis, at times in their own beds. June 2025 wale war mein, the army officers were killed in their beds before they could get up out of their beds, put on their uniforms and report to headquarters. Early morning raids. जब लोग घर में सोए हुए हैं. Said Ali Khamenei was killed early in the morning at 8:30, 9ish, when he had called in this meeting of most of these senior army officers. So it was like a lottery, a wonderful lottery in which Khamenei was killed, members of his family were killed, practically the entire top brass of the Iranian chief of the territorial forces, chief of the navy, chief of the Islamic Republican Guard Corps. You had tons of army officers who were bumped off. But this can be done only if somebody from the opposite side is collaborating with you. And they are collaborating for a simple reason, because they have lost all hope that the system can be reformed or be remedied. They are not collaborating because they see some sort of a Hamza Alvi in Benjamin Netanyahu. No, far from it. They are collaborating because they have their own problems with the regime, which are just not getting resolved. Of course, they are also collaborating because their loyalties have in some way or the other been purchased and brought off. And Israel is a past master at this whole idea of maintaining elaborate records on people जो अपने काम के हैं. Are you getting that? This takes money. This takes effort. This takes a huge amount of work. It's not as simple as making a stupid film. There are tons of things that Israeli intelligence has done across the years, which has been sent out as good audiovisual material for television series and so on and so forth. And there's a ton which nobody knows of even now. अच्छा, इतना सब करके भी इजराइल का प्रॉब्लम खत्म नहीं हुआ है. Now, Israel has been doing all of this since 1948 when the state was established. 70 साल हो गए Israel has been doing it. But Israel has not been able to create the sort of hegemony for itself in the region that it wants to after all these efforts. वो आपको सलाम नहीं करते हैं. वो उनको मौका मिले उस पॉइंट पे आपका किस तरीके से बर्बादी करना है वो उसी के बारे में सोचते रहते हैं. But then you can do this for a simple reason, because you have money. The money is not your money. The money is money that comes from the Americans. Israel can afford doing all of this because Israel has the technology, the money, the necessary political support for it, the training most importantly for it, that comes from the Americans. The Americans put in a huge amount of money into all of this. It's just a week. कल जाके week पूरा हो जाएगा. By now, the United States has spent $5.5 billion in this war. Just 6 days. 6 days का known bill जो है वो $5.5 billion है. इतना तो लोग खुद के लिए नहीं करते जितना हम हमारे दोस्त के लिए कर रहे हैं. Are you getting that? For some perspective, go back and check out how much is it that India spent as far as that Sindhuri operation is concerned. To get some idea कि ये $5.5 billion placed in context दिखता कैसे है. और ये $5.5 billion मैंने क्यों स्पेंड किया है? मेरा कुछ नहीं जा रहा है, मेरा दोस्त लड़ रहा है, मेरे को उसका साथ देना है. Israel, forget the money that Israel has spent. You just forget it. The amount that it has spent, its economy is in its worst condition possible. दिल की तमन्ना कुछ एक बहुत बड़ी चीज होती है. They can afford doing all of this. They are developed countries. They have a higher GDP, they have higher GDP per capita, they have everything. हम जैसे गरीब लोग ऐसे किस्से कहानियों को सुन सकते हैं और दिल को उससे बहला सकते हैं. हम ऐसी कोई हरकतें नहीं कर सकते. हाँ, we can do that by making a धुरंधर. No one stops us from living fantasies at that level. And Israel has tons of those types of spies. Tons. Who can speak fluent Arabic, fluent Persian, who can almost impress you with that whole idea that maybe he's almost an Iranian. Of course, one part of the Jewish nation is of Iranian heritage. That's a different story. There are 6 members in the Iranian parliament who are of Israeli origin, who sit as members belonging to the Jewish communities of Iran. They are those nominated members in the Iranian parliament. Iran is an extremely heterogeneous, very complex country made up of almost a couple of nationalities, very diverse. Masoud Pezeshkian, Iran का first president है who is of what is called as minority extraction. He's not an Iranian proper. He's what is called as an Azri Iranian. So you have Baluch Iranians, you have Azri Iranians, you have Turkmen Iranians, you have Kurd Iranians, you have Arab Iranians, you have all sorts of Iranians. Now, people who speak so many different languages, people who are of different sorts of ethnicities. It's a country almost as diverse as, say, for example, anything that India would look like. It's very ancient, extremely proud. A common Iranian will tell you, Trump, sir, we have seen Alexander come and go this way. Trump क्या चीज होता है? They are very well educated people. So it has an extremely high rate of education and literacy. They have a very good grounding as far as their past and their heritage is concerned. Persian is an extremely poetic language. In terms of the fact that even when they're making simple sentences, it almost seems like, it almost hears that they're speaking poetry. So I can easily tell you, Alexander आके गया, Genghis Khan आके गया, ये आके गया, वो आके गया. Trump क्या चीज है? We have seen all of that. Don't threaten us with this. ये किसी काम का नहीं है. हमने ऐसे ऐसे सूरमा देखे हैं जो हमारे रास्तों से आए और निकल गए. इससे हमें कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ने वाला है. It's a country which has a remarkable sense of resilience and an extremely powerful sense of how do you bounce back. But of course, in the present situation in which you are, never mix God with politics. You're always going to end up with a disaster on that count. B, do not for any reason think that force is the answer to questions political. Because you're again going to land in trouble with that. So, January 2026, the question was political. The answer of the establishment was massive, brutal force. And look where we ended up with all of that. Of course, ये वो generations हैं जिन्होंने कोई war नहीं देखा है. So the revolution's very first thing was the war with Iraq, which went on for 8 years. But almost 3/4 of the country is made up of people who were born in the 1990s and after that. These are not people who have any memories of that war. वो war उन लोगों ने देखा, उन लोगों ने सहा, who were people who came out from the provinces, people who went into the cities. They were the first generations of the migrants from the rural to the urban, with the idea that we are a rich country which has tons of oil and can make a lot of money and our lives would improve. There were hard peasants, workers, herders, who didn't have a problem with going out and fighting against the Iraqis, of martyring yourself for the cause of the nation. The younger generations now don't understand as to why should we perpetually keep on flying the banner of religion and faith, and in that process upholding people who don't understand our desires and our instincts, who want to keep on suppressing and destroying us. Why can't we be like a normal country? Why can't we be like Dubai? Why can't we be like Turkey? Why can't we be like anybody of them? Ayatollah Khamenei's only answer to it was, because the world is not going to let us be so. We will have to be hard, we'll have to be brutal, we'll have to fight. And this is a generation of people who doesn't understand that, who's not interested in it, who's very clear. We had enough of this. Can we have a normal life like young people all across the world, wherein we are not told that something that we desire for deeply is wrong because the faith ceases at a sin? लाउड म्यूजिक प्ले करना है, बियर पीनी है, want to fall in love. But the regime keeps telling you that nothing of this can be done because this is sin, it's against God. But everyone in Dubai drinks beers. We drink beer when we go back to, say, for example, Turkey or Dubai. You can do that there. You can't do that in Iran. Because we are a sacred land. Rings, something rings. All those lovely Indian cities which have gone about banning the sale of something called as eggs and wine because you are in a holy city. Try going to any one of them. दारू नहीं मिलेगी, अंडा वंडा नहीं मिलेगा, कुछ नहीं मिलेगा, क्योंकि शहर सर भगवान का शहर है, पवित्र शहर है. दुनिया में पागलों की कमी नहीं है. It didn't work there. We have idiots trying it over here. Paryushan, no meat should be sold in the municipal corporation limits. And you're like, sir, हम लोग जैन है ही नहीं तो क्या हुआ, फिर भी नहीं मिलने वाला है. So, अंडा नहीं मिलता है, चिकन नहीं मिलता है, ये नहीं मिलता है, वो नहीं मिलता है. आ रहा है समझ में? It didn't work in Iran. Hasn't stopped people from trying it in India with the idea that it will work over here. And great, there's a fancy something like Netanyahu. तुम्हारे नेतन्याहू को मौका मिला था, उसने कहा जो उचित समझो वो करो. असली वाला नेतन्याहू है ना, ऐसा कभी नहीं बोलता. असली वाला नेतन्याहू comes up with this idea that पहले ठोको, बाद में सोचते हैं क्या करना है. First hit, finish them off. He never tells you जो उचित समझो वो करो. No, Benjamin Netanyahu has never said that ever in his life. Benjamin Netanyahu publicly speaks murder. The Israeli Prime Minister who signed the 1994 peace deal with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Yitzhak Rabin, was shot dead on the streets of Jerusalem after Netanyahu made a speech denouncing the deal, saying that he needs to be hanged for this. Next day, he was shot dead in public for this. Netanyahu speaks murder. Netanyahu claims murder. Netanyahu insists on murder. Netanyahu never, not even in his wildest of dreams, would ever tell you, जो उचित समझो वो करो. No. उचित एक ही चीज है, ठोको. आ रहा है समझ में? Now on this backdrop, go and see Indian television and laugh at them. वो और उनकी बचकानी हरकतें. And of course, as I said, after all of this, don't forget it. Israel has not ever achieved what it wanted to achieve this way. Till date, it has not achieved it. It went fighting against Hamas for the last 3 years. अभी अक्टूबर में 3 साल हो जाएंगे. It's a small strip. I don't know. You can't even see it on the map. The first war objective on the 7th of October 2023 was Hamas should be demilitarized, de-armed. 3 years down the line, Hamas is nowhere close to sending back even one gun. Forget de-arming the entire organization. Of course, everyone knows नेतन्याहू बोलता एक चीज है ऐसी चीजों में और नेतन्याहू एक्चुअली करता कुछ और ही है. Not that he can't dearm Hamas, but he also doesn't want it dearmed. Are you getting it? The world's a complex place. You can't help it. Just keep that in mind. Is that clear? Just pray for it that this comes to a close as quickly as is possible, and you don't have to suffer a lot as far as your oil bills. And remember, oil is what is called as the universal input. Once the price of oil goes up, the price of practically every single commodity goes up. So since things are transported using oil-powered vehicles and transportation, everything goes up. A country like India with a huge amount of population reliant on agriculture also has to be worried about this, that oil is an extremely important sort of input in the manufacturing of fertilizers. So if the price of oil goes up, the price of fertilizers goes up. The price of agricultural commodities goes up, the price of everything across the chain goes up. Nirmala Tahi never budgeted for a budget of $150 per barrel. ये अगर खत्म नहीं हुआ, the budget is going to collapse. For sure collapse as far as we in India are concerned. Is that going somewhere? Better. And then as I said, the most important thing, don't mix religion with politics. Never works, has never ever worked. It creates a huge amount of problems and they are never easy when it comes to resolving those problems.